It's week 25 of 2018. We're almost halfway through the year, and this week on the Technado, we're going to talk about some announcements from Microsoft, some announcements from Android, but we've got a lot of breaches to talk about, unfortunately. So let's get to all of that on the Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and as you can see, we found him finally after touring around the world. Not only around the world at Epcot, but then around the actual world. Don Bissett. Don, welcome back.
You know, I've never toured around the world at Epcot, but I have drank around the world at Epcot, which is an achievement that I'm proud of. They should have a certification for that.
They should, yeah. If you remember to pick it up when you're done, you'd probably forget. But but good trip. You actually, some of it was vacation, but you actually got to go over and see ITProTV's office over there in Brighton and our practice labs vendor.
Yeah, we did a meetup in London, which was a lot of fun. We had some viewers and members that listened to Technado and got to hang out and drink some beers and talk. So that was a lot of fun. We want to start doing that more. Anytime we go out to a city anywhere in the world, you know, do a meetup and have people come and say hi.
Is it pronounced Technado?
Technado. It's actually spelled Technado, and it's OU when you're in Europe, so it's a little bit different.
Where's the O? Okay, anyway. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we did do some news while Don was gone, but we have some stories we've saved for him as well. So let's just jump right into it. And the first one here is on Linux.com. It's about Google's Fuchsia. They're adding an emulator for running Linux apps. So does this mean running Linux apps on my Chromebook?
So this article, or this headline, has been kind of moving around a couple of different sites, and it does create a bit of confusion because just a few weeks ago we reported on how Google said they're going to open up the Chromebooks so they can run Linux-based applications. This is different, right? So if you're not familiar with Google's Fuchsia OS, it is a proprietary operating system they've been designing and kind of keeping secret. It's like their Manhattan Project. It's like their secret little OS.
That's ominous.
And they've been a bit guarded as to why they're even making it, right? Because it's not Android, it's not Windows, it's not Chrome OS. It's its own thing. It's not even Linux. It's not running the Linux kernel. It's its own proprietary kernel. So it's 100% total Google proprietary. And nobody knows exactly why they're doing that, but they did a technology preview where they showed where they're actually making it where it can run Linux applications, but it's very different than Chrome. With Chrome OS, it's got the Linux kernel under the hood, so it can run an application in regular user space, and that works. With Fuchsia, it's actually running in a virtual machine. So there's a virtual machine behind the scenes that's running the Linux application on top of this OS. And so to me, the news here is really why they're even further like muddying this already confusing operating system that who knows, maybe it's going to be a desktop OS one day, maybe it'll replace Chrome OS. We don't really know what their goal is with it, but it's interesting to see them starting to build in this Linux support, and it's a precursor to what we're going to see on Chrome OS.
And so Fuchsia's not running on anything I could go out and buy right now?
No, it is open sourced, at least for now, and you could in theory install it on a system. I've done it, just to mess around with it and kind of see it, but because they don't have a real direction for this thing yet, it's hard to use it beyond a web browser. So like Chrome OS is better in practically every way than Fuchsia. One day we'll figure out exactly what's going on. In the early days, they were saying this was supposed to be the hybrid in between Android and Chrome OS, and that we would just have Fuchsia and it would eliminate these other platforms. Since then, Google hasn't done that, and Android on the tablet has pretty much died. So now we have this practically permanent Chrome OS and Android. So I'm not exactly sure where Fuchsia is going to fit in the long run.
All right, so recapping there, you can now run Linux apps on a operating system that no one runs. So congratulations. You can also run Linux apps in Linux as well. So
shockingly well, too. They actually do great.
And doesn't require a VM or anything. So something to check out. In other news here from around the world, on The Verge, Android messages will let you send text from your computer starting today. So Andrew Messages is letting you now do what iOS users could do on their MacBooks for years.
You know, it's funny because Android users have been able to do this for years as well. It's just Google didn't support it, right? So there have been applications out there like Pushbullet and Pulse that, for a couple of bucks, you buy Pulse, and now whenever you send a text message on your phone, it shows up on your computer as well. And let me tell you, that's been really handy for me. Like if I'm here in my office and I get a text message, being able to use a full-size keyboard and type and communicate is way easier than using your phone. It's nice to see Google finally stepping in and saying, all right, here's this service that everybody loves. We should probably offer that, and so now we're getting official support for that. That just rolled out. I know the headline is today, but it rolled out on the 18th, so about 3 days ago. That feature rolled out, and I've tried it, messed around with it a bit. It works as well as anything. I will say that some of the other systems like Pushbullet have more features, but you'll probably see Google try and equalize that. On the Apple side, you've had the iMessage integration for a long, long time. Yeah. They have a different name for it, don't they? Do you remember what it was called? Not Unity, but something continuity, or no, that was Microsoft. There's some crazy marketing term for it, where when
no one uses,
when your iPhone rings, then your iMessages rings as well, and you can answer wherever you want, and FaceTime is somewhere creeping over your shoulder. So that's been there for a while, but it's been locked into Apple's ecosystem. With this, Google has done it with a web interface. So you can be on a Mac or a Windows machine or a Linux machine, and you log into the Android
so in the browser.
In the browser.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so you can see your chat, your SMS, and you can communicate right there. So that's kind of nice, a little more flexible than iMessage, where with iMessage, if I'm on a Windows machine, I'm out of luck. There is no iMessage for Windows, and there's no web interface for it. Although Apple started making steps there where now they actually do synchronize your text messages into iCloud, starting with iOS 11.4.
Right.
So some people think that that's a sign that Apple might be integrating texting into the iCloud platform in the future. We'll have to wait and see. They haven't announced anything, but that may be a coming step.
Yeah, and for those of you that haven't used this feature in the Apple environment before and are new to this, just consider when you do walk away from your computer at work to go get a coffee, or not that I'm going to admit I text in the restroom, and you think you're just going to have a nice little text conversation. You come back, it's all right there on your computer. So lock your computer before you walk away.
And I've sent some really fun text messages over the years with that one. You walk up to an unlocked computer and you think, oh, I can change their wallpaper to My Little Pony. And then you see iMessage open. You're like, wait a minute. Now we can have some real fun.
It used to be, oh, they've got Facebook open. I can have some fun here. Now it's, I've got all your text history. It can be bad. So yeah, just lock the computer.
I like it when people leave themselves logged into social media, because if it's Facebook, I'll tell you one of my favorites. If it's like a married person and they've walked away from their computer and they're in Facebook, you can change their relationship status to "it's complicated." That's my absolute favorite, because then their husband or wife
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's complicated. What does that mean?
Yeah. And it comes true.
I didn't do that. Oh, sure you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure Facebook did this itself.
And nobody notices that right away, but it takes a little bit, and then plant the seeds.
Good times.
I like destroying relationships. It's kind of a hobby.
Yeah. All right. Well, good to know. All right. Next up, we've got an article over here on Ars Technica. Verizon and AT&T will stop selling your phone's location to data brokers. It's always good to hear when they stop doing something I didn't realize that they were doing. So it's like, oh, geez, that was a thing. Well, I'm glad that's not a thing anymore.
Well, I'm curious what's going to happen here, because how this data gets used. A lot of people don't realize how your phone location data gets used. That Verizon, AT&T, all the cell phone providers sell your location data like crazy. They've been doing it for years. They normally do it after it's been anonymized, right? So what they're saying is not that Peter is right here in our office. They're saying that we have a cell phone that's at the ITProTV office. Or more importantly, we have a cell phone that's driving down the interstate going 70 miles an hour, right? That's the type of information they can sell to groups like Waze that does traffic reporting. And how do you know there's heavy congestion on the interstate right now? Because the cell phone providers have location data for phones, and they know how fast they're moving or where they're going to, and that data gets used in a pretty useful way. Well, some of us, maybe I run Waze and I opt in, and so now Waze gets my data and they can report accurately on that. But how many users have opted in to use that? Not as many as people who have cell phones. So organizations like Waze and places like that will buy this data. Well, because of GDPR, that's a big challenge for companies like AT&T now, because technically they're reselling your information. And if a European national comes over here to the US and buys a cell phone, it's still a European citizen's data that has to be protected. So AT&T, Verizon, they're just stopping it outright. We'll probably see T-Mobile do the same thing if they haven't already. T-Mobile is a European company, Dutch Telecom. So I expect maybe they haven't been doing it all along, but I imagine they'll stop if they haven't already. And you'll see the other carriers follow along. But that data, it's not always nefarious, right? Sometimes it is just traffic or whatever that this is getting me used for, but your data is being sold in an anonymized form on a regular basis.
But this the impetus for this happening was because of a leak of that data.
Oh, there was an actual leak.
Well, yeah, the headline here says carriers forced to make change after leak of real-time phone location data. Senator Wyden of Oregon urged all carriers to do this after they did an investigation and found that some of this information had been leaked.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I didn't see that part.
Yeah.
So this is similar to, well, it's not similar to like what happened with Cambridge Analytica, where it wasn't a leak. Like they accessed this information. So now I had to think, like, what would an attacker do if they had all that location information? They really couldn't do anything, could they? So it's really just a breach of the privacy policy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a CYA
yeah, exactly.
move there.
Yeah, but it makes you think. Go back and think about the. It wasn't Verizon saying, you know what, we're making too much money here, and we don't need to do that. We're going to stand up for your privacy. It's we got caught basically with the cookie jar opens, and yeah, we're going to stop doing that.
Huh. Well, we'll have to follow up on this one because I'm curious to see where it goes. If they stop selling this data, it's certainly going to affect things. And you're already seeing that with like Facebook, where it's affecting them. So here, it'll affect other applications that rely on this data. We'll have to see where that one goes.
Yeah, and even just in the story, as I scroll down, there's one update, then there's another update, then it says further update. So this is a developing story for sure. So as the other providers, I'm sure make their announcements and things as well. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure and keep you updated next week.
Part of our new heavily private age that we're moving into right now, which is funny because you'd think with all the stuff going on that we're getting more private, but we're actually not really any more private than we were a year or two ago. That it's just so easy to get at people's information these days that I think we've probably crossed that threshold already. We've gone too far where there's just no way to hide your information.
The location data stuff, too, makes me think about a story we did a few weeks back about MoviePass, where their CEO was basically gloating that, hey, look at all this data we've captured on
He walked
people.
that back pretty quick.
Yeah, and he did. And it was all based on location because they wanted to say, hey, now we know where you go before you go to the movies. Now we know where you go after you go to the movies, so we can say, hey, did you see this coupon from Chili's or this offer for this restaurant before you go out to the movie? So, a lot of different ways they can use that info, but it is a good question. I don't know how, as a bad actor, you would use location data.
The movie you're about to see is pretty bad, so consider going to TGI Fridays for 2-for-1s before seeing that one.
Yeah, you just saw this horror movie. Here's a church nearby. Repent. All right, well, let's move over. Another story from The Verge here. Microsoft says it's no longer planning VR support on Xbox. So, I guess this is something they'd showed off maybe as kind of a concept a while back. Or am I just thinking HoloLens? HoloLens never had Xbox integration.
Oh, right. So no, not yet. And HoloLens technically is not commercially available yet. The dev kit is, but not the finalized product. I thought this article was really interesting. We wouldn't normally report on gaming news, right? So Xbox, that's not what Technado is about. But this one I thought was really interesting because 2 years ago, when we saw the launch of like the Oculus Rift and some of the other VR platforms, everyone was saying this was it. This was the big push for VR. This is going to make it happen. And for people Peter and I's age, we've gone through this with 3D, where every 10 years there'd be a big push for 3D, and then it would fail and go away, and then another surge 3 or 10 years later. It just kind of happens over and over and over again, never quite clicks. VR is kind of doing that, right? There was this big push, and Microsoft got right in there and said, hey, we're going to do it with our PC platforms, and we're going to do it with Xbox. And they were leading with Xbox. Kind of gaming usually drives this stuff. But there has been a very lukewarm acceptance of VR, right? Peter, do you own a VR headset?
I have one of the cardboard ones that I used when they first came out because that's one of those, hey, this costs $5. I can go check it out, see what it is, and play with a couple of apps that are available or watch some YouTube videos on it. But I was not ready to invest, hundreds of dollars into a big system.
And those are pretty limited. If you do Google Cardboard, you've got limited functionality there. The real headsets, like the Oculus Rift, absolutely, they're hundreds of dollars. Facebook bought them for $1 billion. That was the investment these companies were making, and there just hasn't been widespread acceptance. And what Microsoft found was that VR in general is just not working for them, and they're going all in with AR, augmented reality, where instead of putting you entirely in a virtual world, they're putting you halfway in between your real world and a virtual world. And have you seen the HoloLens demos?
I have, yeah.
They are really, really impressive.
Well, because you're not looking at just a screen; you're looking through a screen,
right?
Yeah.
And here's your wall, and you can put a giant TV on the wall, or you can have the Minecraft world pop out of your table. And Microsoft is basically saying, look, that's the future. That's the way that it's going. Now, they've been selling AR goggles or headsets on their sites for at least a year now from several different vendors that are out there, and they keep price cutting them. So when they came out, they were $600, $700. Now they're $150, $200 on Black Friday. You get them for $50 or whatever. They're getting cheaper and cheaper. But Microsoft is basically saying, look, on the gaming systems, VR is not making it. On the desktop, it's absolutely not making it. And that AR is most likely the way that things are going to go. And I could totally see with augmented reality, like getting to a point where you don't need a monitor for your computer anymore. I don't like to wear VR goggles because you can only see what's in the screen. And even if you're watching a movie, like I don't know if you've tried this, Peter, but if you're wearing your VR goggles and you want to take a sip of scotch, picking up the glass, that's tough to do because you can't see it. But with AR, you see what's around you, and all the virtual stuff is kind of stuck on top of that. So I think that's what we're going to see more of in the coming years. But for right now, all this stuff is still so new. It's just interesting to see them kind of back out of that.
Yeah, and the non-gaming use cases, I think, for the AR are so much easier to see. I mean, Microsoft showed that demo just a few weeks back at, I can't remember which conference that was that they had that, but they showed a meeting where basically they were showing a floor plan for something and how they were able to kind of all collaborate on something because you're wearing that kind of headset. So, that's something pretty cool. Did you see the Oasis, the movie?
I did not know.
Oh, it's pretty good.
The
stuff.
Oasis. Oh wait, you're talking about Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ready Player One.
Yes,
yeah,
I did see that. Sorry.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. But we're not there yet.
Yeah,
we don't have the haptic suits and
and we don't have a bunch of RVs stacked on top of each other. We'll have to work on that.
Yeah,
I played Jenga.
I think we're taking we're taking steps there. We'll get there.
The RVs are coming.
Yeah. Just kind of sticking with the gaming leading tech side, also sticking on the verge here, we have an article about the Asus announcing an unreasonably fast 802.11ax gaming router, and I don't think that thing has enough antennas on it. What are we looking at, 8?
You can never have too many antennas, Peter. Everybody knows that. 802.11ax is a new wireless standard. I've known about it. It was ratified earlier this year. I really didn't anticipate seeing any 802.11x hardware or AX hardware until 2019. I didn't think it would happen this year. Asus disagrees and says, hey, it's time to roll this turkey out. And so they have created a gaming router for this, which looks phenomenal. It looks like Sauron's crown or something. It should be in Lord of the Rings.
You don't put that in a cabinet. That's a centerpiece on your dining room table.
It almost looks like an interrogation device or something. So anyhow, it looks really slick. 802.11ax, if you're not familiar with the standard, if I had to sum it up in one sentence, I don't know, blazingly fast. It's capable of carrying speeds up to 1.2 gigabit. So we've got gigabit Wi-Fi, and that's been something people have been chasing for a while. Even 802.11ac, which has been the fastest up until now, it couldn't get that high. Usually you got 400 megabit. If you really pushed it, there were ways to get it to 800 megabit, but it didn't break that gigabit border. 802.11ax does. And when you're at that speed, when you're getting gigabit access, that's an important threshold because a lot of people are starting to get gigabit fiber to their house. And if you have gigabit fiber at your house, but then you have Wi-Fi that's only capable of 400 megabit, you're losing out on bandwidth that you've paid for. 802.11ax helps you to actually get your money's worth. Now, you might have to be 8 inches away from it to get 1.2 gigabit bandwidth on it, but it is capable of doing it. So it's cool to see that. They announced the router. They announced it is capable. They say 1,148 megabits, so 1.1 gigabit is what they're copying to. But
it says it has two 5 gigahertz bands that are each supposed to reach 4,804 megabits per second, so almost 5 gigabits.
Yeah. Well,
that's insane.
With the antennas, you always have to remember, like, the antennas can only send or receive a single thing at a time, and so there's 8 antennas, and they all get kind of divided up into groups. You end up with the strange numbers, but I think what they're saying here is that at 2.4 gigahertz, they're at that 1.2 gigabit, but at 5 gigahertz, they're bonding to get all the way up to 4.8. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's a big chunk.
That's ridiculous.
That's a big chunk of bandwidth right there. And if you're doing 4K video or 8K video and video game streaming and stuff, that's really, really slick stuff. They're able to move that. I don't know. Did they announce a price on it? I don't think they announced a price yet.
I don't think we want to know.
Yeah, they didn't announce the price, but it is coming down the line. This one should be available for sale soon, and I'm buying at least 5 of them. Right?
Sure. Yeah, can I mesh them?
So I know. See, now I have a mesh already, so I can't just go out and buy a single router like this. I've got this huge obstacle to adoption, so I won't buy one of these. But they did mention in here that it supports the Asus mesh, so if you already have Asus routers, it will tie into it. That's what they were highlighting.
But then again, you're like you were saying, you're limited by the weakest link in your chain. So you've got that gigabit internet, you've got this, in the main room, but then if it's coming down to a mesh, whatever the slowest speed is what your max speed's going to be. So
yeah. So for all you out in TV land, if you're looking at the calendar and thinking, boy, Christmas is 6 months away, what do we get done? Here's some gift ideas.
Yeah, apparently several of those.
As many as I can get. Yeah. I need to create like some kind of radiation zone around my house.
There you go. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Next, we're going to kind of switch gears here now to our security content and always the uplifting portion of the week where we talk about what's been stolen.
Depressingly, so many events in the last week. It has not been a good week for security.
Yeah. So let's start over in South Korea. This article on Business Insider. Hackers abscond with $31 million worth of cryptocurrencies from massive South Korean cryptocurrency trading platform that both Don and I have struggled to try to figure out how to say the name of. It is either it should be BitThumb, but it looks like it's either ByThumb or BitHum.
Who's to say?
Yeah, no one knows. No one knows. I assume in Korean it's a lot easier to pronounce. So, take an estimated $40 million from the funds. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
going out the door.
And it was a mixture of tokens too. So it wasn't like just Bitcoin. A lot of the loans we've seen have just been Bitcoin. This one, there's Ethereum. There's several of the other currencies like Monero. So this was more than one. And with these exchanges being attacked, these are the attacks that affect the value of currency, right? If you have a Bitcoin, it only has value if somebody will accept payment in Bitcoin. But if I can exchange a Bitcoin into US dollars, now it's got value even if somebody doesn't want to take my coin. The exchanges make that value there. So when an exchange gets attacked, it directly impacts the value of that currency. This one directly impacts the value of several currencies because it was a multi-coin attack. But it shows that a lot of the exchanges, they just can't be trusted to store your currency. So if you've adopted any kind of blockchain-based currency, you should be storing your coins in an offline wallet, in a wallet that you control, that you've encrypted, that you secure. And your coin should only be in an exchange when you're doing the conversion, when you're converting from one currency to another. That's the only time your coins should be in the exchange, and that will protect you from this type of an attack. But those exchanges, they have to store coins because they've got to be able to convert from one to another. And so they become an excellent target for attackers. And when they get hit, it's usually bad. And this one, 31 million in cryptocurrencies, although I did see the 40 million number batted around, so I'm not sure.
The 40 million we was saying earlier this month, CoinRail, a smaller exchange, had 40 million taken. So that's the second South Korean. And I wonder who could be targeting South Korean. Coin. It could be anybody.
Certainly not North Korea, because we're all friends now.
Oh, North Korea.
Right?
Yeah,
they would tell us. They'd be like, hey, we're buddies now. We'll tell you.
right there.
Yeah. That's obviously Russia, right? I mean.
Clearly. Yeah.
I blame Kazakhstan.
Yeah. Always. And when in doubt.
You ever play Risk and it always comes down to Kazakhstan? Like whoever has that one.
Ukraine is weak. Ukraine is not weak. All right.
Yeah.
Seinfeld reference for you fans out there. All right. Speaking of things stolen, we talk a lot about, they got usernames and passwords or they got location data. This is one that actually is they got important data. So 270,000 patient records breached in Med Associates hack. This is on Healthcare IT News. So the healthcare billing claims vendor discovered a hacker accessed an employee workstation on March 22nd. So it's actually physical security was compromised too. They actually got, you still call that a hack when someone just sits down and download something from the computer, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hacking takes many different forms. Yeah. And, we talk about shoulder surfing, where maybe you're using a computer and I'm just looking over your shoulder at your screen. Technically, that's a type of hack. I mean, the word hack.
That's why I always get an aisle seat on planes.
Yeah.
Super fun.
It certainly helps.
You watch a couple movies at a time.
And then you can watch Game of Thrones and not feel guilty. Yeah. And you got a kid sitting right behind you. Yeah. So in this case, the interesting thing here is that they were just very quick to say, like, oh, this was an employee workstation, right, that got hit. If an attacker has valid credentials on your network and they have access to an employee workstation, then they can walk right through all of your data and not trip any alarms. And that's what happened here. 270,000 patient records breached. Now, they don't actually know that all of this data was exfiltrated and used. This is more of a potential, right? So the attacker had access to 270,000 records, so they have to assume that all of them were accessed. And maybe they were. We'll probably find out more. Usually that's what happens, right? Yeah. A month later, they come out and they say, well, actually, it was 1.2 million records, not 270,000. So we'll see. But it does highlight the importance of physical security. And hospitals, they have it tough, right? Because they've got those portable computers they wheel into the rooms of the patients and they leave them in the hallway, and the nurses are constantly running. And if there's a, code blue, right? The nurses all have to run for that, and they leave those workstations there. They can't be expected to stand right by the workstation all the time. So securing those is really challenging, but it's an important part if you're going to protect patient medical records. It's a challenging job. Working in healthcare is probably one of the most difficult security environments right now because of one, just the physical environment, that you have patients everywhere. And then two, because of how sensitive the data is. Like, I mean, it's hard. I do not envy people that work in healthcare security.
Yeah, and it's interesting reading this article too. It's not just that someone has access to your medical history now and what they could do with that, but by the types of information they got, they actually have enough things where they could commit insurance fraud. Then they could go and file claims because they have your history, your insurance numbers and accounts and things like that. So this actually happened back in March 22nd, and so who knows what's happened since when it happened and now being reported. And it's interesting. It also says under HIPAA, organizations must report breaches within 60 days of discovery, and they're not sure yet why this one took so long to report. So hopefully we're not hearing more about this in the future, and that's all. But yeah, it's scary. Well, speaking of things stolen, this is a fun story. A man is charged with making $1.3 million in fraudulent returns to Walmart. And this is interesting because what he was actually doing was buying electronics, taking them home, opening them up, and taking the guts out, essentially, and then returning said electronics with no guts. So I'm curious, $1.3 million is the value of the items as they sit on the shelf. I wonder what that actually equates to in terms of what he could sell those things for. And
so
geez, it said it was like 1,000 stores.
I scoured the internet trying to find all the details I could on this. It was so interesting to me because first off, 1.3 million in fraudulent returns. My first question was, how did it take so long to catch somebody, right? Because you hear about somebody where if they return 3 laptops at Best Buy shuts them off and won't let them return anything anymore. Like, that's it. They're no longer able to. So this guy, 1.3 million, how did he get to that point? So it turns out he did returns at over 1,000 different Walmarts. He traveled the country going Walmart to Walmart doing this. And he would buy a computer, and he would take not all the guts, but he would take parts out. Now, I could not find a single article that told me what the parts were. I have to guess graphics cards, right? Because you can take a graphics card out of a computer, and they almost all have an onboard graphics card as well. So the computer will still function.
So they can turn it on, test it, and see, oh, yep, you're returning a working.
Whoever's at the return desk might not know to check that. That's what I would assume. I mean, it could be he was taking the SSDs out or RAM, take the RAM out, and then say, oh, the computer won't even turn on. And it wouldn't if it doesn't have RAM. But was he reselling the hardware after that? And they never say what he did with it. Like, did he sell it on eBay or whatever? But GPUs are in high demand right now because people are Bitcoin mining and things. So that would be my guess, is that he was taking the GPUs out and then returning the computers. But he did this at over 1,000 Walmarts before they finally caught him. I'm just shocked that there was no system that managed to put this pattern together. Because when you do a refund these days, they make you give them your driver's license. You have to sign the little form, and apparently all that's for nothing. And if you do 1,000 refunds, then it kicks in.
That's when it flips, the little light goes on at Walmart HQ down in Arkansas.
Normal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I was kind of surprised to see it. I did wish that I was able to find more details on this, but yeah, that guy, 1,000 different stores, 1.3 million.
Over 18 months. I mean, that's a full-time job. 18 months, 1,000 stores. I mean, you assume he's maybe taking some weekends off there in between, but math-wise, that's a few stores a day. So
one of the articles I saw, not this one, one of them did a breakdown on it, and they said he was making like $70,000 a week, basically. So it's
but again, that's if he's getting 1.3 million in value.
Then there's no way he'd be getting full or even a fraction of that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm curious about. Yeah, so hopefully we find out more about that.
Remember, kids, crime doesn't pay.
Well, not immediately. You've got to really spread it out. So
crime pays about 10% value on eBay.
Yeah, exactly.
Minus shipping.
All right. Don, I know nothing about this next story here on Security Week, so I'm counting on you. And I have a Mac here, so I'm really counting on you. Mac OS's QuickLook cache may leak encrypted data. So is data just leaking out of this MacBook as we speak?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, you're totally screwed. So QuickLook's a really cool feature inside of Mac OS. And had I thought about it, I would have whipped something up here for the show. If you have a file like a PDF or a PowerPoint or something like that, let's say I have a PowerPoint presentation. I could open it in Microsoft PowerPoint. It would have to run and load the application. It takes a little while. But if you just want a quick look at what's inside of there, Apple has a number of filters loaded in the OS that gives you a preview, and it makes the icon show up as like something from the actual file. Actually, we just did a webinar. Let me see. Do I still have that? I probably threw it away. Let me see if I still have a webinar here I can throw up on the screen and show you what that looks like. So the way QuickLook functions is it gives you a preview, and I'll zoom in. So here's this PowerPoint that I just dropped on my desktop. And see how the icon, it actually is the first slide of my presentation. And I can click these arrows and it'll move forward. There's the second slide of my presentation. And if I zoom in, like you can sort of see that's my little my image. It's me.
You're wearing the same shirt.
So that's what QuickLook does, right? Well, if I have this document, this PowerPoint slide, stored on an encrypted hard drive. So if I take a hard drive and I do file vault on it or whatever and it's encrypted, QuickLook is basically building a little thumbnail cache around that file so it can represent it like this. And if you just like hit spacebar on it, it opens up, and here it's showing me that PowerPoint presentation.
And this is not in PowerPoint.
I am not in Microsoft PowerPoint.
Or?
Yeah, it's in it's in QuickLook.
Okay,
yeah. So it just up top here it says that I'm in Finder because QuickLook is a part of the operating system. It doesn't show as a separate program. But this is what QuickLook does. The problem is it's got to cache those thumbnails somewhere. And it's caching the thumbnails on your operating system drive, not on the encrypted drive with the data. So if your removable media is encrypted, but your onboard disk is not, in theory, an attacker could get to your onboard disk, which is not encrypted, and then find those thumbnails and see the data that was normally stored on an encrypted drive. Now, there's two problems here, right? The first problem is that the thumbnails should be stored on the same disk as the media that's being read, right? So that way you maintain the same security level, the same folder permissions and so on. So Apple's made a mistake there. They need to be storing that, and I'm sure they'll push out a patch that takes care of just that, and they'll store that cache right near the files where it should be, right? The second problem, though, is in order to exploit this, the security researchers are assuming that the people out there care enough to encrypt their removable media, but not encrypt their actual operating system drive. All right. Well, Apple's File Vault, when you turn it on, it's really just clicking a check mark. And it's so easy that I don't know anybody who encrypts removable media but doesn't encrypt their own local disk. But macOS does not enable File Vault by default. Even in the latest macOS Mojave, if you do a clean install, it does not enable File Vault by default. It does prompt you during the install. It says, would you like to do encryption? But if you tell it no, then it's perfectly happy with that. It's up to you to enable it. And I would think, and maybe this is my fault, right? Because sometimes I assume people are smarter than they are. But I would assume that if you're smart enough to encrypt your removable media, that you would encrypt your own device as well. And if you've done that, then all of these thumbnails that are getting made are being made to your encrypted OS partition. And this is a non-issue. It's really not a big deal. But if you're encrypting your removable media and you're not encrypting your desktop, these thumbnails are getting cached. And that's a vulnerability. That's a weakness. And you may be leaking data out and not realize it.
How long does that cache sit there then? Is it just until the OS needs that space again to cache something else?
So in the newer versions of macOS, there's actually not a limit. It'll store as much as you need until you run out of space. So for example, here we'll take let's see. I didn't check this before the show, so I'm not sure exactly what I'll see. But if you pull up, I'm going to pull up my Apple menu here, and if I go to About This Mac, and inside About This Mac, it tells me about my Mac, and I can go to Storage, and it tells me about my storage, and see how it's calculating my hard drive.
Yeah.
So it's telling me that I'm using 213 gigs and I've got 284 gigs available on my disk. And I've got this yellow here. That's my system. And then I got apps and so on. And somewhere in here, it's not going to show it to me. Darn it. I might need to pull this up in Disk Utility. But sometimes what you'll see is a little block in here that's labeled as purgeable, right? Purgeable data. And what that means is it's things like cache that aren't really required, that if you run out of room, it can purge and wipe them out, and then that'll make room for other things. And I probably have that in here. It's just too small for me to see. Let me go into Disk Utility and see if it'll show me in there.
While you're doing that, is this dark mode? Is this Mojave?
I'm not running Mojave. I don't understand all the big hype around dark mode.
I don't understand it either.
You've been able to turn your bar dark up top since like El Capitan or whatever. That's not a new thing, but everybody's like, oh, Mojave has dark mode. What they're talking about is like in the Finder. You know, if I launch my Finder, this is still white, even though I've turned my bar up here dark. So, that's I'm not running Mojave yet. Wow, it's just, I guess I don't have any purgeable space on mine. But anyhow, on yours, you might see it. So that's where that space comes from. And so with QuickLook, I mean, it could have gigs or even terabytes of thumbnail data stored there. If you're not out of space, then it stores it there and it's ready to rock. So yeah, that's where that goes. But yeah, so this one, it may not be an issue for you if you're like me, right? My removable media is encrypted with File Vault, and my laptop is encrypted with File Vault, so I'm secured along the line. So this is a non-issue for me. I don't care. But for the average Joe user out there where you're not encrypting anything, it's also not an issue because you're not encrypting anyway. So what do you care? But for those people that fall in a particular use case, encrypted removable media, non-encrypted operating system disk, then you are, in theory, leaking data out via QuickLook.
So one more question. In theory, let's say I'm not encrypting either, and I have a USB key that I plug in, and I do those files, then I take that key out and I go put it in my safe, and so that's how I'm encrypting it. That cache, though,
it still
exists locally.
It's still there, yes.
Even though those files are safe because they're locked away.
Right.
So
yeah, if Apple was storing the QuickLook cache on the same media as the original file, this wouldn't be a problem. And when you remove that thumb drive, the QuickLook cache would go along with it.
Yeah.
So that's the fix that I imagine they'll roll out because it's easy and it solves the problem. But who knows? Maybe there's a lot more complexity to it. Maybe that QuickLook database is stored in one single place and it has to be in one place. That would be a problem. I just have to imagine sooner or later Apple's got to put their foot down and say, you know what? We're just going to require encryption. Like, if they do it on the iPhone, you don't have a choice. Your iPhone is encrypted, the whole thing. They should do that with macOS.
I don't know what the argument would be against it. So
history, I don't know.
Something, so.
Maybe performance. You do take a little bit of a performance hit, which people don't worry about on a phone so much, but they do worry about on a desktop. But I don't know. I just... The only thing I can think of is that they can't encrypt the device for you ahead of time. Because if they did it ahead of time, that would mean that they had access to the private key in order to do the encryption in the first place. So you have to encrypt it yourself so that it's you generating the private key. But they could force you to turn it on yourself. I mean, that wouldn't be a hard thing for them to do. I'm not sure why they haven't done that.
Interesting. All right, well, let's finally shift gears to a little bit of physical security here. We've got 2 stories about locks, physical locks. And what's funny is when Don said, "Oh, I've got this story about a lock, and it's the world's worst smart padlock," I said, "Oh, I think I saw that too." And we compared stories. And we actually have 2 completely different, but both equally insane stories. So, Don, I'll let you explain yours first here on Slashdot.
All right, the first one, the article came from Slashdot, but the research actually came from a cybersecurity company called Pentest Partners, and they were evaluating a smart lock. And with the smart lock, it immediately sent up some red flags to them because they saw it sending traffic using HTTP, not HTTPS. So it was communicating over the network in a non-secure way. So right off the bat, that's a big red flag. And they said it took them about like a whopping 2 minutes or they say within 2 seconds, to spot that problem and to be able to exploit the lock. If it's doing HTTP traffic, just unencrypted traffic, it's easy to intercept, modify, retransmit, to man-in-the-middle it. Like, I mean, you can just totally take over this smart lock. But as they started digging into it, things kept getting worse and worse. And what they found, this is the worst part, was that if you went to the website for TapLock, is what it's called, TAPP, TapLock. If you went to the TapLock website and you logged in with your account, your user ID was in the URL, and the user ID was just a number. And if you incremented your number, if you just changed the URL and bumped it up a number, you would see the next customer and the next customer. When you logged in, you were effectively logged in for everyone. And in the web page, you could see the person's address, and you could hit the unlock button to unlock the door. So not only could you unlock somebody's door, you knew exactly where that door was. I mean, this is really like the worst case scenario for a smart lock. Like, the only thing they didn't have was a quick way to search and find your neighbor. Like, you just grab people at random. But this is really, really bad. And it highlights the dangers of IoT, of Internet of Things, that if we assume these companies are building security into the devices, then we're being fools. We have to know that, especially with these smart locks, these are lock companies.
Yeah.
You know, a year ago, they were making deadbolts, where it's a great technology. It works great. You twist a knob and it's locked. You twist it and it's unlocked. And now we expect them to be computer security experts. That's just not realistic, right? So they're deploying these cloud technologies that are very, very weakly secured. So if you have a tap lock, you're screwed. I mean, there's really no, like, the company's just not capable of writing secure software and patching it and updating it. Like, you just need to replace that lock. I don't know anybody that has a tap lock, so I'm not sure how widely spread these are, but I thought it was a good, I don't know, like a morality tale or something. Like, here's a lesson for everybody. IoT, you just can't assume that it's secure, because it rarely is. And there are some companies out there that are doing a great job, that are really making sure their stuff is secured. But in this case, it absolutely wasn't.
Well, it's funny because you assume, you know, if you went to Walmart and you saw that on the shelf, you'd say, oh, this is a lock, it's secure. And if you don't know things about HTTP and HTTPS or to look for those, you know, you're not going to figure this out until one day your stuff is not where you left it, and it's not secure. But what I would say is just take the guts out of the lock and then return the lock at Walmart for...
for 1.3 million in profit.
I assume there's like some gold-plated something in there. Here's my ridiculous lock story, Don. If you can bring this one up. This was tweeted about from the lock-picking lawyer on Twitter, and I guess he's a guy that tweets about locks, and so he was sent this lock to test by a company. It's a fingerprint lock, seems secure. Only you have your fingerprint, should be set to go. But he noticed this Torx screw on the side, went ahead and undid that, and the lock fell apart. So he said, well, there's a problem with your lock. And the best part is if you go down to the next the picture there from... Oh, wait. If you click on it.
Yeah, he's got it here on the side.
Yeah, okay. The response from the company, which obviously English not the first language here, but they said, literally, we designed this fingerprint lock with the purpose of against theft. However, the lock is invincible to people who do not have a screwdriver. So I mean, honesty, truth in advertising. I guess I appreciate that, but yeah, anyone who doesn't have a screwdriver is out of luck.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
When you look at a padlock, there should be no screws. There should be no access ports or whatever, except for where the key goes to unlock it. With a fingerprint lock, you shouldn't even need that. This one, yeah, I mean, it just shows there are some companies that have been in the lock industry for 100 years and create very reliable, secure products. You can't just trust a company like a fly-by-night. Did they ever say the name of this lock?
I hope not.
Yeah. It just says the company. So,
yeah,
if you're on Amazon and you're price shopping, I want to get a smart lock, and here's this one for $1.99 shipped straight from Taiwan or whatever. That might be a great price bargain, but those haven't had the research and development done behind them to make sure that they're secure, safe, and stable. Even the big names are having problems. You know, Amazon's had some issues with their key system, and some of the other vendors. Diebold has had some issues, and they've got the financial backing to make their products better. Some of these other companies, they don't necessarily have that. So we got to keep an eye on it. We got to be protective in your workplace and in your home, right? Because these devices are everywhere. I would say it's more dangerous at home than in the workplace, but it's a big threat either way you look at it.
And it's great. The first comment under this tweet is saying, "Isn't this the lock that broadcasts a MAC address over Bluetooth in plain text, allowing it to be hacked?"
Oh,
and the next person said, "No, that's the tap lock." So yeah, you've got you're being bold on scrolling through
blindly scrolling
uncensored
through
Twitter on a live show here. Wow. Well, anyway, yeah. So that's a lot of fun. So thank you to the lock picking lawyer for that, and thank you to all of you for joining us today here on the Technado. A lot of cool stories we looked at there, and hopefully a lot of these we'll see some updates on in coming weeks, because there's some that these I think are definitely to be continued stories. Well, I wanted to mention a couple of things. If you of course, if you liked what you saw here today or heard, if you're listening on the audio-only version, please like and share it with your friends and rate us. We always appreciate that. And always want to give a shout-out to our sponsor, to ITProTV. We've got some great training content here at ITProTV, and you can check it out using the coupon code podcast30. Get 30% off for the lifetime of your account. Don, any closing thoughts there?
No, it's been a heavy security week. Hopefully next week won't be so secure. So security related. At least it gets kind of depressing. But we are in the summer months, and there's a couple of big conferences that are going on. Mostly gaming conferences right now, but we're about to get to some more hardware shows. So hopefully there's some new hardware tech coming out. But for those of you that are traveling for your summer break, be sure to just be ever vigilant at all the various ways that credit cards can be skimmed and all those other things. Just think about keeping your data safe.
Yeah, you were gone for 2 weeks. Now you're back. I'll be gone next week, so we're going to have Daniel in here, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll see you in 2 weeks, but they'll see you next week, and I hope when I come back I have a job.
Or a credit card.
Yeah, a job and a credit card. All right. Thanks, everyone.